Kia ora anō te whānau. Welcome back to our series of webinars that we are holding to keep our whānau informed and updated around not only our court case, but around our history and whakapapa. Just a reminder to keep an eye out on our ipanui, Facebook posts, of course the webinars that are happening now. Some key dates that are coming up. On the 4th of February, we have our whānau wānanga down at the Ōrākei, at our marae at Ōrākei, and then on the 9th of February is our hikoi from Ōrākei Marae through to the High Court, encouraging all our whānau to come and join us on this march for our mana, for our whenua, and more importantly, for our tamariki mokopuna and our future. I'd like to now introduce the third webinar series to you, e haere ake nei.
Mai ea te tupua, mai ea te tawhito, mai ea te kāhui o ngāriki, mai ea tāwhiwhiki ngā tūā. O I kataki nā te Māori, ko te Māori ahua noa ki runga ki e nei taura, ki runga ki e nei tauira. Kia tau te Māori ki runga ki e nei pūkenga, ki runga ki tēnei kāhui. E tukuna no te whai ororo a tāne te wai o rā. Tāne te wānanga, ko te wānanga, tēnei ka puere atu nei, ka eke ana kōrero ki te taumata, puta ki te whai ao, puta ki te ao mārama. Whāno, haramai te tōki, haumi e, hui e, taiki e. Tihei Māori ora. Koutou e ngauri o tuperiri. Ngā oho, te tāu, te uringutu. Ko hono mai nei, ki tēnei whakapāhoranga a ipurangi. E rere arorangi atu nei kia koutou. Nau mai, piri mai, nau mai, hono mai, nau mai, haere mai. Haere mai ki tēnei te renga tuatoru o enei takitakinga. Te renga whakamutunga rā hoki. E taki nā tuai ngā kōrero mō ngā tuāhuatanga e pāna ki te kaupapa nui kei mua i tō tātou aro. Kāti, e tangi tonu ana te ngākau ki o tātou mate, rātou kua hinga i roto i ngā rā, i ngā wiki o tēnei tauhou, me ngā mea o roto i ngā marama o mua atu. Kua riro rātou, I te au kume, I te au roma, I te au hirere, e hirere atu nei ki te pō uriuri, te pō tongotongo, ki te pō e au ei, tā rātou moe, ko te kōrero kia rātou, moe mai rā rātou. Hoki mai rā kia tātou. I roto i ngā huatonga o te wā, ko te ora, kia koutou, o tira kia tātou, anei mātou, te pai, kōrero o te pō, tēnei ahihi pō nei, e tuku nei a mātou mihi ngā whakaaro nui kia koutou mai i tō tātou tupuna i a Tumutumuwhenua e tui honei. Tō tātou marae, te kai manaki, te kai pupuri, i te ihi, te wehi, i te tapu, i te mana, o tua whakarere a tatu iho ki a tātou ki Ngāuri, ora o te rānei. Tēnei kā mihi, tēnei kā tangi atu kia koutou e te iwi, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa.
E te kura, tēnā koe te whananga, nau hakatūwhera tēnei kōrero mō te pōnei, i roto i te whare tupuna nei Tumutumuwhenua, nō reira te whananga, ngā mihi ki a koe.
Kia ora.
He mihi tēnei ki a koe e Rachael, turi o Ngāti kahamunu, e roia mō Chapman Tripp. Hono mai kia matau, mō tēnei kōrero hakamutunga, tēnei kōrero tuatoru, nō reira kia kōrua, tēnā kōrua, nau mai. O tira kia koutou Ngāuri a tupuriri, e noho i te kāinga, tēnā koutou katoa, ko hoki mai anō o tēnei kōrero Hei whakakapi, ngā kōrero I mua I te haere ngā tu ki te kōti teitei ki runga waipapa I te wiki, ngā wiki e tū mai nei. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa.
Kia ora.
Hello everybody, sitting at home or wherever you are, watching this, our final webinar of 3. As we have been talking about our history here, not only in Tāmaki, but from the very beginning in Whenua, down through the North Kaipara, South Kaipara, and eventually here in Tāmaki Makaurau. And why are we doing this? As our Chairman Marama Royal noted, we are heading to the High Court on February 9, and we will be taking a case against the Crown and also Marutūahu, who are also defendants in regards to the Crown's offer of certain lands, which we regard as in our heartland, in particular the sites being Taurarua, the pā sites around Judges Bay, and also Waipapa, one of our old fishing villages down at Beach Road, Stanley Street. And our argument is that we say that this is our area, it is our heartland, we are the Yahika, we are the mana whenua, and if the Crown are going to give land to any other tribe out of our heartland, then we, at the very least, should be asked and ask for our consent for that to happen, or not, because we are the mana whenua, we are the Yahika of that area. So we'll be going to the High Court. We've had a long journey to get to this point, 7 years now on reflection, 2014, when we first heard that the Crown were offering these lands to the Marutūahu group of people. And following us agreeing to sharing the volcanic cones and the wider rights of first refusal over surplus Crown properties in the wider region, we thought that this was a step too far, and that we would not accept that the Crown could do this to transfer lands out of our heartland into the hands of individual iwi, in particular a group of iwi, Marutūahu, who have come together as a collective to claim these lands which we say are ours. So we've been on a long journey, whānau, and we aren't quite there yet in terms of our story. And just to recap, last week we had Rōpata Paoa here, also Margaret Kāwharu and Joe Pihima, and where we got to was we talked about the gift of Tauoma, East Auckland to Kehu and Te Putu from Ngāti Paoa, which set up that relationship, and that land being given by Tumaure and Tahuri, then both having the mana to arrange that tuku whenua, and that leading to a period of a number of battles between ourselves and Ngāti Paoa, which we talked about last week. And where we are at now is we have Te Kawo's generation of Uruamo, Whatarangi, Pakiorehua, Tokotoko, Tinana, Aurua, Atereta Mā. As the 1800s start, they were about 10 years old, 15 years old, and then growing into their adulthood in a period of relative peace. Well, there was peace from about 1790 onwards to 1820. So Apihai, Te Kawo, and his generation, probably in their early 30s, come to take the leadership. And at about 1820, if we pick the story up there, we have the arrival of the northern tribes, in particular Ngāpuhi, under Kōkeru, who descends on Tāmaki with a number of muskets, and they attack Maui Naina Pā and Mokoia Pā, which is in the tuku block in East Auckland that we had given to Ngāti Paoa in the area of Tauoma. So in 1820, Ngāpuhi arrive. Apihai is staying at his main camp, his main kāinga at that time, which was actually not at Ōrākei, but was at Onehunga in Māngere. And he's called for by Ngāti Paoa to come and aid them in the battle. Te Kawo accepts, and he arrives, and it's basically a signal really of the relationship things had got to, coming out of the wars of kuponga and rangi matarau and orohe and the loss of Tarahawaiki and to Maori, that the Te Kawo would be tono too as a young leader. And even though his dad was killed by Ngāti Paoa, he came to Maui Naina to help Ngāti Paoa fight off Kōperu and Ngāpuhi. He mea nui tēnā. In the end, with Te Kawo's help, Ngāti Paoa managed to fend off the Ngāpuhi. So, however, it would be only a year later that we would have another Ngāpuhi come back, and that was Hongi Hika. He'd actually bumped into Maihi Te Hinaki in Sydney on his way back from England, and he had amassed an arsenal, a huge arsenal of weapons and muskets that he had acquired in Sydney. And Maihi Te Hinaki of Ngāti Paoa, rangatira from them, they met, and Hongi Hika said, Maihi Te Hinaki said, well, what are those guns for? And Hongi said to him, well, they're for you. You better go back home and get your people ready. And Maihi Te Hinaki hastened back to Tāmaki and to Tauoma and Maui Naina and prepared his people for Hongi's arrival. Yeah, so do you have any more kōrero te add there, Te Kura, on Kōperu and those early battles? I guess coming out of Nui as well, there's something building up in Hongi that he needs to take care of.
Ko te kōrero e mea ana, o te tino pūtake o te haerenga atu o Hongi ki Ngarangi, ki te rapupū. He rapupū hei rānaki i te mate i runga i aia ko Morimu Nui tera. I hi Ngai tana tuahine, a waitapu i hi Ngai, e tahi o ngā mātua o ngā kārangaranga maha i reira, ka noho tērā i runga i aia, e āki nui ana i tōna ngākau ki te rapūtu. Nā ko ngā pū i hokona eia, e rāua ko te tangata nei ko the theory i poihākena i ahi te reiria, nā ka hoki mai, ka hārea hongi ka mahi wāna mahi. Nā ko te tahi tirohanga e pēnei ana ko tana haere, ki e rā iwi maha ai, he rānaki i ngā tini mate i runga i aia, ki e rā iwi, ngā raruraru ona ki e rā iwi, ai. Engari, ko te tahi atu wāhanga ko tana whakangungu i aia, i tōna iwi ki te whakamahi i te pū, mo te wā, kia huri mai ia kia tāua o Ngāti Whātua ki te patu i a tāua, mō tana tuahine, mō ngā mātua, mō tōna whānau pātata, o ngā kārangaranga, tini i hinga i Morimu Nui. Nā, ka whai ko te takanga e korotia nei ko te Ikaranganui te tau 1825. Nā koa rima tau ke ia, e haere ana i tuarahi, ko Tāmaki, ko Waikato, ko Ōrākei, ko Rotorua, ko te Tairāwhiti, ko toa ia ki te whakamahi i te pū, ka huri mai ia kia tāua i muri i te rima tau, nā ka raupatu, ka patura i a tāua i o Ngāti Whātua ki runga o Kaiwaka, i uta ake o Wangawhai i te tau ko 1920. Nā hei tāpini noa ki ngā kōrero ko a takoto i ako.
Kia ora. So Hongi arriving in Tāmaki 1821, this time Te Kawo isn't in Tāmaki, he's on leading his own expedition along with another number of other iwi who joined, Waikato Tūhoi, I believe, on Niami o Whenua, and some others. They go on their big haerenga as far as Pōneke, and Hongi descends 1821 at Maui Naina, Makoia, and lays waste to the pā. He has so many guns, a huge arsenal. Ngāti Paoa had very few, if any, guns. and so many chiefs fell that day. Te Kawa's in Pōneke, and I'm unable to help. He comes back in 1822 to Tāmaki, finds the place desolate, the women and children they had left behind, our tupuna, they had fled into the Hikurangi, Waitakere Ranges, which is where in 1822 Te Kawa goes as well. Ngāti Paoa have left, they have gone south back into their heartland, Whakatiwai, those places. Te Kawa comes back to Hikurangi, finds his woman, kids, and also to Ōrākei, which is near Muriwai. He stays there for a time and then finds it safe enough to come back down into the Waitemata. However, not right on to Ōkahu Bay, goes to stay at Te Rehu just behind the zoo there and stays there for 2 years, 1822 to 1824. And as you mentioned, Te Kura, over those years from 1821 to 1825, Hongi has gone to a number of places, basically getting better and better at what his aim was, which is to get his troops used to using the guns and the muskets. By 1825, he was pretty good at that.
Kia ora.
And it said, in those decades preceding the musket wars, Ngāti Whātua were very strong iwi, very hard to beat. Marutūahu, a very famous warrior, he often would beat any attempt on Ngāpuhi or any of the hapu up there. And so, yeah, kei te wehi rātou ne, they really had to practice. And Ikaranganui was the battle, or the kaiwaka there, the site of that now infamous battle where many of our people lost their lives.
Kia ora.
Of Te Ūrākei Marae, ngā hapu katoa o Ngāti Whātua. So 1825 we have Ikaranganui. Now Te Kawa had left Tāmaki, he'd gone via Manukau, got to Muriwai, hung a right, and then was making his way up to Kaiwaka to assist his Ngāti Whātua whanaunga in the battle. However, he met them coming the other way. They were fleeing, and our Ngāti Whātua people were routed there. And as I understand, Ikaranganui means that so many of our people died. They were like fish in a net.
Kia ora.
Pera, waranga, naika.
Koe tēnā.
So we were decimated, really, and probably we haven't really quite recovered from that event even.
Kia ora.
Now, most of Ngāti Whātua come down to Tāmaki, they're fleeing, Apihai is helping. They gather at a place called Waikomiti. Now, Waikomiti is, you have Titirangi, then you have Langholm. Just before Langholm is a place called Landing Road, and that's called Waikomiti.
Kumete.
Kumete rānei. And I reira, they take the wahine and the tamariki, and they send them down to Mangapiko, to a pa of Rauroha. Now, Rauroha is Ngāti Paoa, so he provides shelter for Ngāti Whātua there. Now, a number of the Ngāti Whātua put together a taua and head straight back north whilst the children and the women leave for safety to get some utu, and they attack a number of parawhau at Otamatea and have some success there. But then the bulk of them head to Rauroha's pa, down Mangapiko, Ngāti Paoa providing the manaakitanga. And then Hongi Hika finds our people there, the bulk of them. Te Kawa, I believe, is still around Tāmaki, we're not too sure, still researching that. Hongi arrives, he says to Rauroha or Ngāti Paoa, our beef is not with you today, it's with Ngāti Whātua. Please leave the pa and we won't disturb you. We just want Ngāti Whātua. And to our regret, Rauroha didn't help us in that battle, he left and took off. And so a number of Ngāti Whātua chiefs fell in that battle, including Te Tinana the Great, also Whanariri, and Te Rewharewa, who's a noted Te Ūrākei toa. He was the first out. he challenged the whole lot of them all by himself, and he died with a number of 5 spears in him, still writhing on the ground, trying to defend his people. So a number of people died there. 1826, Te Kawau, he decides he must leave Tāmaki, leave Auckland, gathers again at Waikomiti, Waikomiti rānei, and they end up on going to Pukewhau, which is on the Waipawa River. However, in 1826, some still returned to fish and garden to maintain our connections here, our fires, keep them smouldering away. And Te Kawau actually has another attempt at coming back in 1826 to reoccupy his rohe, but he starts off at Mahurangi. He believes he has allies up there. Some of our Ōrākei people had returned there.
Ngāti Rongo.
Aye. And he builds a pa there called Waiaro rānei, Dairy Bay, at Dairy Bay. So, however, we have Tiraro, he attacks. And again, our people have to flee. They flee, they leave Mahurangi, they go to Orewa, they rest there, they go to Takapuna, they rest there, they go to Pāhiki, which is Herald Island, they rest there, and then they end up at Kaupapa, Henderson Mill, and they wait there for help. Now we have recorded at Kaupapa, Henderson Mill, 1826, Kawau te tinana Uruamo Whatarangi. They're all there with their women and children, waiting for some help. And in the end, who arrives? It's Hakopa Pairimu, and he's Te Uringutu. Maybe do you want to just give his whakapapa?
Ka pai. Hakopa Pairimu ko te tupuna matua. Nā warapare neu te ingoa ko Chiaki, ko te aho rānei. I te wā I whakaeketia te pā I Māngere kōrero nei te rānei ko te ara pueru, he mea whakaeke e tuperirima I te mutunga o tēnā pakanga ka riro mai te karani pāpā o Hakopa Pairimu, ka whakamōkaitia e tuperiri ka nohotahi, ka tuputahi me tuperiri. O reira, I pai te nohotahi, koa I ehe wai ohu. Nā kai puta ko Hakopa mā. Me ona uri, ko rātou tērā, e tapai nāna ki te ingoa ko te uringutu. He mea manaki e tuperiri.
Ka pai. So that's good background too, where Uringutu comes from and who were their leadership, Hakopa Pairimu. So Hakopa Pairimu arrives, he's been staying with his Uringutu clan at Whakatiwai with Ngāti Paoa. And Ngāti Paoa with him send 10 waka up to Henderson to rescue Te Kawau mā. So they go to Whakatiwai, they go via the Piako River to Horotiu and then to Hauwhenua, which is near Maunga Tautari. So they stay there till 1831. So that's about 4 to 5 years our tupuna spend in the Waikato at Maunga Tautari, waiting it out, supporting each other. There's other tribes there, Ngāti Paoa, there's Marutūahu there as well, there's Ngāti Haua, Maiturangi even, all living around there and hoping that things will calm down. Now, in 1831, around Maunga Tautari, we have a number of pā that got built by Marutūahu, 20 in the record. Te Kawau had one, I understand, and I've just forgotten the name of his pā at Maunga Tautari. But Marutūahu built 20 pā. Now, this is of much concern to Ngāti Haua, who are the ahika and the haukainga there, and they're worried that Marutūahu and ourselves might overstay the welcome and their generosity in providing an area for us to stay. So that leads to a lot of tension, and it culminates in a one-day battle. It's called Taumata Wiwi, the one-day battle, a ferocious battle but all this pressure had built up, 4 or 5 years of all living in someone else's rohe, tensions building up, led to taumata-wiwi. Now, Ngāti Haua, assisted by Ngāi Te Rangi, attacks Marutūahu and Ngāti Paoa, and on that occasion, Te Kaua fought alongside Marutūahu and our Ngāti Paoa whanaunga. And one-day battle, negotiations were had, and it was all agreed that everybody should leave, and everyone would be given peaceful passage to leave the area of Maunga Tautari. So we joined with Ngāti Paoa and started walking north to Ngārua Wahia. Ngāti Paoa turned right and went back to Whakatiwai, and for whatever reason, and it's probably that Te Kaua still didn't feel it was the right time to come back to Tāmaki, he hung a left and ended up at a place called Te Horo, which is near Whatawhata. I'm still trying to find out exactly where that place is, but it's in the heart of the Waikato. And he stays there until 1834. So it's another 3 years. Now, towards the end of those 3 years, around 1834, the balance of power is everyone's starting to get guns now. Ngāpuhi aren't winning so many battles, they're actually losing a few. They lost one in 1827 at St. Helier's Bay, where they lost to Ngāti Tipa, Ngāti Paoa and Ngāti Whātua, who had come back hearing that they were camped out over at Motutapu. So there were more and more losses that Ngāpuhi was suffering. So by 1834, the political landscape was changing, and it was starting to be that it would be safer to come back to Tāmaki. Te Whero and also his iwi of Waira Waikato, he probably had enough of everyone and wanted people to move back to their areas in case people overstayed their welcome, and it would lead to more stress. So it was agreed in 1834-35 that everybody would return. However, there was something that was going to make the plans potentially come unstuck, and that was Ngāti Tamaoho called on Te Kaua e Te Horo to help Tamaoho in a battle against Ngāti Paoa at Whakatiwai. For something that had happened to Tamaoho, so Te Kaua helped. He sent 1,000 of his toa, his warriors, to that battle. And there were a number of killings there. Now, this had the potential to again, destabilise the peace, which Te Whero wasn't happy about, because he wanted everyone to be at peace so they could leave his area. He wanted everybody out, and he probably wanted all people in Tāmaki to provide a buffer between the northerners coming down into the Waikato, and we would be back on these places in our parside. So he tries to negotiate a peace, but hears of an ambush on his way to Whakatiwai, turns and leaves, and so we haven't quite got peace yet. However, the last crops that Te Kaua planted was in winter, August of 1835, and they began their process to move back to Tāmaki. Younger people had advanced to the Waikato Heads and onto the Awhitu Peninsula to plant crops, so that when the whānau arrived, women and children, there would be carbohydrates, kumara, taro, to feed everybody as they made their journey back. So at the end of 1835, Te Kaua and 600 others had returned onto the Manukau on the northern shores at a place called Karangahape. Now that's called Cornwallis today, and there's a par site there, and the Trust Board actually has protected that through the district plan as a special site to us. Te Whero's own iwi, Apakura Ngāti Mahuta, assisted in our return, and they ended up staying at Awhitu to keep an eye on things and to be there if anybody needed help. Akitai are back at Pukaki, Tamaoho Ngāti Tiata at Waiuku Pehia Kura on the Awhitu Peninsula. So that's where we are in 1835. There's still an uneasy peace. But we have made the final return, a return back to Tāmaki. And so the next phase is then re-establishing ourselves back on the Waitemata and so on. and also being there, that shaky piece, there still needed to be a lot more kōrero to go on so that everyone could live in harmony. Now, there was a peace ceremony, hui, held at Puneke in 1835 on the record, and at Ōtāhuhu. And also it's noted whatarangi and Uruama meet Ngāti Pāo and Kahukoti at Ōrere, and also at Ōkahu in those years, 1835 and 1836. We also planted our first crops at Ngari in 1836, established a pā at Te Whau, in addition to what we have at Karangahape. The year after, there are two more pā at Mangere and Ihumātao, and we begin fishing on the Waitemata. Haven't quite established villages on the Waitemata because this is State Highway 1 for Waka, coming down the Rangitoto Channel, and Ngāpuhi, we're still a bit wary of them. However, the year later, 1837, was our first two pā were built back here on the Waitemata, just down the road here at Ōkahu Street, and those were built by Whatarangi and Uruama. First gardens planted at Horotiu, Queen Street, Rangitoto Iti over at Remuera, and in this 1837 spring, a tono was given by Te Kawo Te Whirowhiro to come and live at Onehonga. Come over from Awhitu and stay at Onehonga with them. Te Whirowhiro indeed does that the year after, in 1838, and moved to Onehonga. So now the big hui, peace ceremony, peace hui at Ōtāhuhu over 8 days in March. Paoa, Tamaho, Ngāti Tata, Mahuta, and Te Tau, all their herua o Ngāti Paoa, Te Kawo, and Te Whirowhiro. That same year, later, August, September 1838, Te Tau and Ngāti Mahuta meet here at Ōkahu, and they discuss defence and gardening plans here for the Waitemata. Later that year, there's one more hui with us in Ngāti Mahuta, and this is when lands are gifted around Remuera. And that's why did we gift lands to Ngāti Mahuta, to Waikato, to Whirowhiro? And really that was because of the 10 years we had spent at Maunga Tautari and Te Horo. And we had built up a bit of a debt, and we needed to repay that debt kia ea, to make it even. And so that was the background to the lands that were gifted around Remuera, Newmarket. However, many people forget also that before we went to Waikato during the Muscat Wars, we had also assisted Waikato, and they are Te Whirowhiro's father. So te Kurataiaho, mā e whakamarama mai era neke hanga te pāpā Te Whirowhiro me tana tono ki a Ngāti Whātua.
Ai. Ai, o mōhio te rauanganga te matu o Te Whirowhiro. E haere mai ana e tahi iwi mahataru i te taha o te matu o te rauparahama ki te whawhai kiaia, kia rātaura o Waikato. Haere pēnei mai a te rauanganga, ka tai ki te rākainga o tātou ki te kaipara, ki tuatata atu o reweti ko te ingo o te pā, ko ruarangi haerere, pātata ki te tari o Woodhill Forest. Nā kei reira ruarangi haerere. Ka tai atua te rauanganga ki reira, ki o tātou tupuna o te tāu, e noho atu nā ki reira. Nā ka whakatakoto i tāna tono. Engari ko tāna tono he mea whakatakoto ke maroto i te waiata, i te mōteatea. Ka whakarongo o tātou tūpuna ki te waiata, me te tono e mau ana i roto i te waiata, ka mohi o rātou he tono tēnei. Ka whakatakoto ria hoki e te rauanganga, e tahi taonga, hei takoha, ki o tātou tupuna o reira. Ka whakaingia te tono, nā ka piri atu o tātou tupuna ki te rauanganga, ka hoki tahi ki roto o Waikato, ki te whakatuara, ki te awhiake, ki te ia tera wanganga, ki tērā pakanga tino nui, e ki ana I roto I ngā kōrero. Ko te pakanga nui katoa tēnei o te ao Māori mai rana. Neke atu I te kaumano tāngata I tērā pakanga. Nā, ngā pakate nui ngō ngā pakanga Māori, I tahi wā, e 50 tāngata noho. E tahi wā, e tahi rau. He nui tērā, me kei reira e tahi rau. Engari kia eke ki te kaumano tāngata koni atu, ka hore tērā āhua I kitea mai rāna. Nā, ka noho ko tērā pakangara, te mea nunui katoa te ao Māori. Ko tōna ingoa ko hinga kākā. Nā, I reira o tātou tupuna, e āwhina ana, ia waikato, ia te rau wanganga, I runga I te tono a te rau wanganga. Ko te wā, e kia ana, kei te takiwa o te 1807. Engari, kihe ana ki rangahau tonu tātou I tērā, mea I mua ke atu. Tēnā pēr ko ngā tau I mua atu I te 1807. Ana, ka noho tērā hei momo hehane nama. I pai ei I ngā tau whaimuri mai I te wā I te taimaha tātou, ara, ngā āhuatanga I pā ki Tāmaki, tai tu hoki ki te Ikaranganui, ka taimaha tātou, I māma tā tātou haere, ki roto Waikato, ki te noho, ki reira, I roto I ngā haumarutanga. Nā te aha, nā te mea, nā tātou. Te rauanganga mā, I āwhina, I manaki, I ngā tau o mua atu. Nā ko taua āhuatanga o te tāututu, o te aroha atu, te aroha mai, te manaki atu, o te manaki mai. Nā kuia tērā, o te tahi pou tino nui I tīmatai tēnei āhuatanga o te manaki a tētahi ki tētahi. Me te mōhio hoki, e tino whanaunga. E tino whanaunga a Tarahawaiki, a rātau tai iho kia te kawauma, e tino whanaunga kia te rauangangama. I roto I ngā whakapapa o te kawauma, e hoki ana ki roto o Ngāti Teata, ki roto o Ngāti Mahuta, me te taha kia ngā oho. He whanaunga tatu.
Tēnā koe. Te kaua is there, Urupainga is there, helping at Hinga Kāka. Amazing, 10,000 people. The largest battle ever that held on in Aotearoa. So we have, towards the end of 1838, another hui held, as I said, lands gifted to Te Whiro in Waikato. And it's also a tono was put to Te Whiro for Waitakau, for him to come and live on the Waitemata. To come from Onehunga, where he was mainly based at that time, to come and live with Te Kawau over here. He never came. Ngāti Mahuta didn't come in the end. They stayed at Onehunga and at Awhitu. Early 1840, obviously we have the treaty being signed in February. There's winds of change happening. These peace ceremonies are still happening, not quite sealed yet. And then Whatarangi holds another hui of the chiefs of Kaipara in the Waitemata and Tāmaki. And the kaupapa of the hui was to help best to secure peace and order and a cessation of war and strife was the agenda of the hui. And out of this hui comes He Aha Te Hau, early 1840, where they remember that tauparapara and they reinterpret it. And that is when they decide to send Te Rewiti, who's Atereta's eldest son, nephew to Te Kawa. And 7 chiefs went to Kurataiaho. The majority were Ngāti Whātua. There were a couple of Waikato chiefs who also went on this haidinga to go and offer land to Hobson, the Queen's representative, offer him land in Tāmaki if he would move the government to this place, hei pau whakairo I te Waitemata. So there'd be a new mana and authority here on the Waitemata, placed by us, I tika atu te kōtu, koia te pau whakairo katu ki Waitemata. So that was their strategy, to find a powerful ally, to help with the protection of the rohe, of the tribes, to bring prosperity that they had seen in the north. They had, with the missionaries and with the whalers, they'd seen the prosperity in the south with the whalers in particular, and what that wealth could bring them in terms of protection, in terms of buying arms that you could protect yourselves with, but also the new things that we needed to protect ourselves with, like medicines. We were dropping faster by the new diseases than the muskets. And so that was hoped that this is, I guess, the big strategy of our people. They don't just go for any Pākehā, let's go get the governor, the Queen's representative, no less, and bring them here. And as we know, Hobson did come in the end. However, I just want to go back to, there's a few more attempts at peace with Ngāti Paoa. 1840, another delegation goes to Ōrākei, led again by Whatarangi and Uruamu. So there must be a lot of diplomats in that whakapapa line coming out of there. So they go down again to try to make peace for those murders at Whakatiwai in 1834 that Te Kauaumā, they took part in with Ngāti Tamoho. Now in 1841 we have Ngāti Paoa come up here again, another attempt to bring peace. Kahukoti and 600 of Marutūahu, the record says, came to Ōkahu. These talks were led by Hoterene, Te Rewiti and Uruamu. Te Kauau hasn't been at any of these big hui yet. Again, peace wasn't had. Pai te hui, the hui went okay, but still haven't sealed the deal. It wouldn't be until February 1842 when Haora Tipa, a big rangatira from Ngāti Paoa, comes from Whakatiwai to make peace. Now on the way here, he's trying to be, a number of Ngāti Whanaunga and others from Marutūahu are trying to talk Haora Tipa out of it, to not engage in any peace talks, but indeed to come here and have a pakanga. But in the end, Te Kauau was there, and Te Tinana is there, and Haora Tipa presents a hoi, a pero, and two toki, who were named after Ngāti Whanaunga chiefs who had died at Whakatiwai. Now Haora Tipa then sings a waiata, a lament, waiatatangi for Tarahawaiki and what they had done to him. In return, Te Kauau also sings a waiata, and then that's it. The peace is finally sealed when those two chiefs sung their waiata. To fully seal the peace, Te Kauau then invites a hapu of Ngāti Paoa, Ngāti Hura, to live at Ōkahu Bay with him as a full expression that they are at peace, that they could stay together at Ōkahu Bay. And that's exactly what happened. So we finally had that peace in 1842. There's a number of other things happening. Obviously, Europeans have arrived. We're feeding them, we're trading. Ourselves in Ngāti Paoa are doing really well. We're really good traders. Our tupuna are really good entrepreneurs. From 18 first arrivals of Europeans and Pākehā here, right until the 1850s, later the 1850s, Ngāti Paoa and ourselves dominated the market down at Waipapa, which is where all the waka would land to sell all the produce to the settlers. And we did really well working together. So let's hope that we can get back to those days. And we do have the kawinata with Ngāti Paoa. They're on our side in the court. They're having their own troubles with the Marutūahu collective. So it's probably a good point now to bring you in, Rachel. Sorry you've been waiting a long time there. But to come into the kōrero as we head into court, maybe if you could give us a bit of a high-level overview of the legal strategy and arguments that we'll be laying before the Justice Palmer.
Tēnā koe ngā, tēnā koe te kura. Can I start to say that it's an absolute privilege to be here this evening and welcomed onto this webinar. I've been working for Ngāti Whātua Ōrākei at my law firm Chapman Tripp for 5 or 6 years now, and this is the very first case that I started working on there, and it's been an incredible journey to see all of the kōrero gathered, tested, and expressed in what is going to become evidence in the High Court in Auckland on the 9th of February. Now, I understand that the last couple of webinars have been running through all of the kōrero that will be presented, and you might be interested in how me and the team that I work with have translated that into a legal case against the Crown, and that's what I'm going to focus on in the next 6.5 or so minutes. So I think if everybody just keeps in the front of their mind that this battle is being fought in court on two fronts. The first is against the Crown. The challenge to the Crown is about confirming what its obligations to Ngāti Whātua Ōrākei are, what they are today, what they are as a result of the 2012 treaty settlement that was entered into between Ngāti Whātua Ōrākei and the Crown. And the obligations that the Crown owes to you are based on a number of historical events that have happened between the Crown and Ōrākei. Those include the tuku of 3,000 acres of land to the Crown to establish a new government in 1840. Those obligations arise out of decades, centuries of treaty breaches by the Crown against Ngāti Whātua Ōrākei. Those obligations also arise out of the settlement journey that Ōrākei has been on since the occupation at Bastion Point. And they end, or we say they begin again in 2012 when the Crown promises to conduct itself in a mutually respectful way with Ngāti Whātua Ōrākei in the future. However, the Crown says that its obligations are written down in this thing called the overlapping claims policy. The overlapping claims policy is the Crown's treaty settlement policy, and that policy, our argument is that that doesn't take into account or reflect tikanga. The overlapping claims policy says the Crown is not the referee of any tikanga arguments between neighbouring iwi or hapu. It's up to you to sort yourselves out. And if you can't do that, then we'll have to make a decision ourselves because we have to get these treaty settlement things done. So the overlapping claims policy, because it doesn't take tikanga into account, is like a sieve that has let other iwi through into the rohe of Ngāti Whātua Ōrākei. And it's also done the same thing in particular down in Ikaranganui, which we can talk about later. It's an unhelpful organ of the Crown, the Waitangi Tribunal, that said in 2007 of this overlapping claims policy that, Auckland is very complex, tikanga is very hard to determine in Auckland, so if any iwi that can put its hand up and establish an interest in Auckland, all of those interests are equal. So that argument against the Crown leads us to the battle on the second front, which is with primarily with Marutūahu and with Te Kawerau Āmaki, Ngai Taiki Tāmaki and Te Akitai Waihoa in particular. So essentially all of the kōrero from both sides has to be played out in court in order for Ōrākei to confirm what the Crown's obligations are to Ngāti Whātua. So you'll hear in court, if you're watching or if you're attending, that Ngāti Whātua is the plaintiff. That means that the case is Ngāti Whātua's and that they are asking the court for something. What Ngāti Whātua Ōrākei is asking the court for are declarations. It wants the court to declare that Ngāti Whātua Ōrākei has ahika and mana whenua in this rohe. It also wants the court to declare that the overlapping claims policy must take tikanga into account. So these declarations that Ngāti Whātua Ōrākei is asking for are largely directed at the Crown, but if Ngāti Whātua Ōrākei succeeds in getting those declarations, then it sort of takes care of Marutūahu and the others in turn, because if the overlapping claims policy must take tikanga into account, then the Crown cannot offer Taurarua, Mount Eden School, Ponsonby Intermediate to Marutūahu. Now, Ngāti Whātua Ōrākei being the plaintiff means that Ngāti Whātua has to prove its case. So essentially the reason that we're in court is to prove that Ngāti Whātua Ōrākei is the mana whenua in this area, and the way to do that is to provide evidence on all of the main issues. And the evidence will be presented by our witnesses, who I'll list shortly, but you'll hear evidence from Ngāti Whātua Ōrākei witnesses about the raupatu in 1740, about the haerenga to Waikato and the return, about the 1840 tuku to the Crown, and also about the 1868 Native Land Court judgment by Judge Fenton about the Ōrākei block. So where is this all taking us? It's heading towards Ngāti Whātua Ōrākei asking the court to referee tikanga to an extent. What does it mean? And most importantly, what is the place of tikanga in the law of Aotearoa New Zealand? And how does tikanga constrain Crown actions? And this issue, although it would be easy to think that we've been grappling with that since 1840, it's an issue that the courts have only been starting to grapple with over the last couple of decades. So in our view, that provides an opportunity to influence the law in as far as it can take tikanga into account. And with every opportunity comes a bit of a challenge, and that challenge, the main challenge we see is that the court is going to hear kōrero that is dearly held on all sides of this argument, and it's going to have to make up its mind about those kōrero. So that's the job for Justice Matthew Palmer. Shall I just run through some logistics? So for those who are planning on coming to watch through the live stream or rotate through court over the next 10 weeks, there will be enough space for everyone. I'll give you a little bit of an overview about who does what and what it's called and who sits where. So unfortunately, well, perhaps fortunately, you're represented by a bunch of lawyers. That is me. I come from Chapman Tripp, and so does my boss, Justin Graham, and we work with a Queen's Counsel called Jack Hodder. And Jack Hodder is an extraordinary legal mind and has been arguing this case for Ngāti Whātua for the last few years. There'll be lawyers for the other side, but I'm sure you all know who they are. And if you don't, then that's fine. The case will begin. The whānau will hikoi to court, and then the legal argument begins. We will give some opening submissions, and those submissions are an overview of what we are going to tell the judge, what we hope to prove to the judge, and give a little bit of a preview of our arguments. You'll then hear our evidence, and that evidence is given by witnesses. We have two kinds of witnesses. We have whānau witnesses and we have expert witnesses. So our whānau witnesses are Te Kura, Ngarimu, Margaret Kāwharu, and Taiaha Hawke as well. So they will relay all of this kōrero to the court. And then we are followed by some expert witnesses. And the reason that you have expert witnesses in court is because, well, of course, Ngarimu is going to say that Ngāti Whātua Ōrākei is the mana whenua in this rohe. But we have people from outside of Tāmaki Makaurau, people who are extremely well respected from Tūhoi, Maniapoto, Ngaitirangi, as well as some very well-known historians who can back that up with their own independent research and views. So Ngarimu will give his evidence. He will then be cross-examined by the lawyers for the other side. Cross-examination is a chance for the other side to try and say, oh, gotcha. It's a gotcha moment. So they'll be trying to ask tricky questions, get Ngarimu, Te Kura and others to slip up. But that's all part of the preparation that we've been going through for the last few months and over the next couple of weeks, so we don't trip up. Right at the very end, which is coming into April, you'll hear closing submissions from Ngāti Whātua and the others. And it's important to note that Ngāti Whātua will open the court case and Ngāti Whātua will also close the case. So the last thing that the judge will hear will be from Ngāti Whātua Ōrākei. And then the judge goes away, he'll think about the issues for a number of months, and then he'll issue a written decision about is Ngāti Whātua Ōrākei entitled to these declarations that they want. And so that is not necessarily the end of the road, because there are options to appeal decisions, but that would be getting far ahead of ourselves. Right now we're just focused on the next couple of months, and I'm looking forward to having your presence with us in the courtroom, whether it's in person or via the video. So nō reira, tēnā koutou katoa.
Kia ora, Rachel.
Tēnā koe, Rachel. So this must take tikanga into account, and the last 30 years we've had the Resource Management Act 1991 come in. Councils trying to figure out who do we consult. Probably a number of iwi who took that as an opportunity to try and restart some fires where they went cold. Since 1991 through that legislation. As you mentioned, we had the Wainwright decision, Waitangi Tribunal, which really opened this up, that said you could just establish an interest, whether you're waka landed there, whether you fished there, whether you had a battle there. Even if you lost the battle, it's an interest. And then all interests are valid and all interests are equal, which is what a number of tribes, some tribes, and in particular Marutūahu, have used that as an opportunity to come here into Auckland and claim that they are of equal mana and status to us. And then we have the super city. Everyone's a mana whenua. There's 19 now and climbing. There's more knocking on the door. We've heard over the last 20 odd years people saying, everyone's mana whenua. We all just share everything up here. There's no boundaries. Te kora pēhea tō whakaaro ki tēnā. Ka taia ki te toha te mana o tēnā whenua. Ki ngā iwi katoa o tētahi rohe?
Kāhore. Nā te kāwanatanga, nā te kaunihera o ēnei tau tata, e rā tika ngai whakatakata. Kāhore rawa I pērā, mai rāna, he mana kei te whenua, kei tētahi, kei ētahi, o ngā rangatira, o te hapū, o te iwi o te rāwahi, kei a rātou te mana. Ko kororo te koe, ētahi hitori nui. Tā tātou haere ngātu, ki roto waikato kā noho. I noho tātou ki reira, he noho. Ka tuku te wherowhero mā, waikato mā, ka tuku I a tātou kia noho. Koira noho, ka tuku I a tātou kia noho. Me tā tātou mihi utunga kore kia rātou mō tērā manaki. Ka wehe tātou I re, e harai te me I a tātou te mana o te whenua. Engari, hoino ko te āhei ki te noho, ko te āhei ki te mahikai, me era āhua katoa mo te wā tātou I noho I ki reira. Ka wehe tātou I te kāingara, hoki maina ki tō tātou whenua, o tātou whenua I Tāmaki nei, mahu atu te kāingara, me ona mana katoa, ki ngā rangatira o tō wāhira. Kāhore hoki, te mana I makere I o rātou ringaringa, I a tātou nohona ki reira. Mai tō tātou, I mua I tō tātou tāinga, I a rātou te mana. Tā tātou tāinga atu, I a rātou te mana. Tā tātou nohotanga ki reira, I a rātou te mana. Ka hoki mai tātou ki Tāmaki, I a rātou tō nono te mana. Taino ki tēnei rā, kei a rātou tō nono te mana. Ko te rātou ira tira. Ka huri mai ki Tāmaki. Nā, ko kororo te koe, ngā hitori tino a tāhua. Te hoki ngā tahitanga mai o te wherowhero, Ngāti Apakura, Ngāti Mahuta, ki te manukau me tātou. Ko tātou ki karanga hape, ko rātou ki awhitu. Ka hoki mai tātou ki tēnei taha, ka tono o te kawau, ke whakawhiti mai, a te wherowhero mā, ki one hunga, ki humātau, ka whakaitera, ka neke mai rātou. Nā, ka tuku, ka tuku whenua, te kawau, ki a rātou, ki remuera. Ki one hunga hoki, he whenua tuku. Nā, ko taua kaupapa anō, ka āhei rātou ki te noho, ki runga, ki awa whenua, ki te whakamahi i awa whenua. Engari ko te mana o awa whenua, i mua i tā rātou, i mua i te tuku, i a te kawauma, i a te kawau. I te wā rā rātou nohona ki reira, i a te kawau tono anō te mana. Nā, anei, kei te mōhio tāua ki tēnei kōrero, i te wā i hiehia rātou ki te hoko i ngā whenua o Remuera, ki te Pākehā, i aha rātou. I haere mai rātou ki te pātai ki a te kawau. He aha, i a te kawau te mana. Nā mōhiona tāua i whakae a te kawau, ai, paina, hoko nātu. Nā te kawau, te whakaitanga. I te mea, i a te mana. I mua i te tuku, i te wā rātou e nohona ki reira, me te wā hoki i pātai rātou, ki aia, me nā rātou e āhene ki te hoko. Nā, me tō tāua, ko Remuera teira, e rā pihi whenua, e tahi pihi whenua i one hunga, nā maumahara nāu, i ngana a Waikatoma, ki te hoko, i e tahi wāhanga o ngā whenua i one hunga, ka ore pātai ki a te kawau. Nā, ka whakaheatia teira, e te kawai, hei, kia maumahara koutou, kei iau te mana o ira whenua. Nō reira, kei reira te tauira, mai rāna, mo tēnei mea te mana i runga i te whenua. I a tātou, i runga i enei whenua, mai anō. Mai anō i te raupatu, he raupatu kātahi, he noho, me te tahuahi, te pupuri i tērā ahi kā, mai tērā wā, tainoa ki tēnei wā, e kātonu nei, e kātonu nei, e kātonu nei te ahi. Ka ore no ke watu. I roto hoki i tērā nohotanga ahi kātanga, he pā, he kāinga, he māra, he urupā, he kōiwi. Mai tērā wā tainoa ki tēnei wā, kei a tātou tonu, tō tātou urupā, kōiwi, tainoa ki tēnei wā. Kui rā ngā kōrero e Ngarimu.
Tēnā koe te kura. Tēnō marama o kōrero, tēnō marama te whakamaramatanga, te whakatakotoranga o mātou tikanga. Nō reire te whānau, me ūtonu ki o mātou tikanga. As te kura said, we have the ahi kā, we have urupa, we have kāinga, we are here. We may have gone away to live on other people's lands, whose land we're not claiming today, to stay for a while, to fish, to garden, but this is our place. And although others have come here to be near the Pākehā, to trade, also to be near us in whanaungatanga, it should not be confused today as mana of the whenua, as mana whenua, or as ahi kā. So whānau, that brings us to the end of our webinar series. So, ka nui te mihi kia koutou, e hono mai ana, ngā mihi kia koutou. Please keep an eye on Facebook for all of the updates of how you can become involved. The Waiata Haka practices, the hikoi on the 9th of February. We'll be preparing on the evening of the 8th of February as well, welcoming Ngāti whātua nui tonu, any other iwi that want to come along to come on the walk to the court. Nō reira e te whānau, ka nui te mihi, ka nui te aroha kia koutou katoa. Tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Mā upea noa e whakakapi tēnei hui, tēnei kōrero e te whanaunga.
E te kāhui atu e ngā tupuna o te pō, neke mai rā, whakatatata mai rā ki a mātou. Ki e nei taura, ki e nei tauira, e noho nei o ti rā ki ngā uri, e noho mai nā i o rātou tohunga, e whakarongo mai nei ki ngā kōrero i te pō nei. Tauwhirotia tēnei whānui ki ngā tauwhirotanga nui whakaharahara o te rangi o te whenua. Me tea te hauora ki e ū ki runga ki a mātou, te māramatanga, te ora nui, te ora tike ki a ū ki runga ki e nei taura, ki runga ki e nei tauira. Kia tira marama nuku, kia tira marama rangi, kia marama te hinangaro, kia marama kia aroha te ngākau, kia marama te wairua, kia kaha, kia toa, kia pakari te tino, kia hora hoki te marino, ki mua i te aroro, ki te huarahi, ki te ara, i takoto maira, tēnei, te whānau nei, te hoatu, hōkai nuku, hōkai rangi, ka puta rā ki te whai ao, ka puta rā ki te ao mara. Te wāhanga ki ngā korona, ngā wāhanga o te pōnei, te whakairi hea atu kia paitara a whare, ka noa i runga, ka noa i raro, ka noa i roto, ka noa i woho, ka puta ki te taha tū, ki te taha tika, ki te taha wātea, ki te whai ao, ki te ao marama, tūturu e rangi, tūturu e papa, ka whakamaua kia tīna,
Tīna.
hui e
Tā
tā
e ki
e.
e.